You there, Budley?
Yes, I am. And we already have 4 attendees.
I see that. I can't wait for the information. I love the enthusiasm.
Um, you're okay in the sharing and want to put your screen up?
I'm in the process of moving the file over to that computer, so just give me a moment here.
Okay, fine.
We got time.
Plenty.
Do I sound okay? I'm using a Rode microphone.
Terrific.
Good, good, good.
Looks good, sounds good. Like your picture in the background.
My wife wanted a water view, so I bought her that picture.
There you go. The only thing you need is hair and makeup now, and you're all set to go.
Yeah. Um, She also wanted a mountain view, so I cut down all the trees in the backyard. So
You plan well.
Mr. Improvisation, I guess.
Or I
Okay,
prefer the old saying, necessity is one ugly mother.
right. All right, let me find my file here. Okay, let's find it here. All right, so you want me to screen share?
Yes, please.
Okay, you can see that now.
Yes, I can. Looks good.
Yeah, the only issue is I'm working off of two computers here, and I'm gonna be like using the mouse or the tracking pad on one, thinking it's the other. I'm gonna get them confused, but I'll figure it out. Figure it out in time.
Well, it's like walking and chewing gum. You either bite your tongue or trip or something
Hmm.
like that.
I'll do both probably.
Okay.
I'm prepared. All right, everything works, Budley. So we got the next 25 minutes to kill. So
I'm here. I do a start in 10 minutes, do a
right.
start in 5 minutes, hit the record button, do the intro, and hand it over.
When it came on, it said it was recording already.
It should not.
It doesn't say it is, but when I first came in, it said it was
Oh,
recording.
hello, everyone, and welcome to Western Connecticut Score's webinar on whether it is better to build a business from scratch or to buy an existing one. I'm Bud Freund, the webinar coordinator and a business mentor here at Western Connecticut Score, and I'll be your host. Our speaker today is Joe McCaffrey, and more about him in just a minute. But first, some brief information about SCORE. There are about 10,000 SCORE volunteers nationally, in about 200 local chapters. SCORE is an SBA resource partner. Western Connecticut SCORE has about 130 mentors with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. We offer three primary value-added services to small business owners. First, free one-on-one counseling, either face-to-face, telephone, email, video, which can be accessed via the Request Mentor link on our website or via the link on the screen. Second, we do educational in-person workshops and live webinars and do about 100 per year. Third, we have extensive resources on our website, including a network of subject matter experts at your disposal. Now, for some useful information about today's event, if you have a question, please use the chat window at any time during the presentation. It is located in the lower part of your screen, and we will be addressing it at the end. Our workshop will end at 1 p.m. to respect your time, and the session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available at westernconnecticut.score.org within the next couple of days. Now, our speaker, Joe McCaffrey, is a business advisor with Community Investment Corporation, which is a not-for-profit economic development lender licensed by the Small Business Administration to administer their lending programs. Joe is also a certified business mentor and a subject matter expert in commercial real estate, small business strategic planning, financial management, and capital sources with Western Connecticut SCORE. I'll now turn it over to Joe. It's all yours.
Thanks, Budley. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. The topic we're going to cover today, I've actually covered this before in a number of in-person workshops that I do for SCORE. And so the material that I'm going to show with you today, though, is it's a lot of information, but it's also new information. I'm going to be showing you all the new stuff that I put together. I like the newer stuff. I thought the other stuff needed work. So as Budley said, the webinar is being recorded. You will get the link. Everyone who is attending today will get a copy of the slides that I'm going to show you. Do the questions at the end. Be done in an hour. And also share my contact information with you at the end. So it's a big topic. I cannot cover everything that you need to know in an hour. So what I decided to do was I took a lot of the material that I created and I broke it into like two webinars. So I'll probably do another one in the fall and on more specifically on how to buy a business if you decide that's the route you want to go. But for now, we're just going to stick to the basics. This will kind of be the intro. Okay, so the road to becoming an entrepreneur can take different paths, and one is you could take over a family business if one exists. I'm working with a few clients right now who are in this situation where they are, second, third, or fourth generation owners of a family business, and running a business is very different than working for a business. In many cases, in both of these cases, they've worked for the business before. And now they're moving into the position of having to run the business. And it's a lot of work. You have two jobs. You're the manager and you're also the owner. You've got day-to-day business making decisions and also general strategic planning that goes along with being an owner. So when most people think about starting a new business, they envision building everything from scratch. And I think this is part of the entrepreneurial allure. People, it's like, oh, that seems like that'll be fun, and it is fun, but it's also a lot of work. And it's one option. It's not the only option, and it may not always be the best option. And that's why we're going to take a look at it today. You could also buy a franchise. I think last I looked, there was like 3,000 franchise concepts in the United States. Where most or all of them or most of the upfront work is already done for you. And you have ongoing support to help you run the business once it's open. And the reason why franchising is so popular is because it's like entrepreneurism on training wheels. And that's kind of the way that I look at it. And this is a big topic. And another one of those things where we could spend the whole day talking about franchising. And actually, I don't need to do that because one of my colleagues, Hope Machado, has already done this. She's got some webinar videos that are on our YouTube page if you want to check it out. There's some there. We'll touch on it a little bit, but if you want to get more in depth on the franchising stuff, that's a good place to go. It can be a little risky doing. It's less risky, but there's a lot involved with doing franchising, and so you really need to do your homework. I wouldn't start doing that without doing some homework first. And then finally, you can buy an existing business where all or most of the upfront work has already been done for you. It's kind of like outsourcing the startup part of the equation, if you will. And unlike a franchise that has ongoing support, this option provides only limited support in that regard. The training wheels are going to come off at some point. It's usually like a 6 month, maybe year transition period where the existing owner will stay on, but then they're going to break away, and then you're going to be flying solo. Can be an effective expansion strategy too, instead of organic growth. If I've got a number of people who are looking to grow their business that I'm working with right now, and they're looking at buying other people's businesses that are similar to theirs. So it's not just for people who are just starting out as entrepreneurs. In my opinion, not enough consideration is given to looking at this option of buying an existing business, which is why I decided I wanted to create this webinar and share it all with you. So let's see. A lot of people ask me, I get asked the question a lot, which is, hold on a second, I gotta get my bearings here, which is the best option? And, it's a difficult question to answer without looking at the specifics of each unique situation. And I'm going to help you, tell you how to start a business. I'm not going to tell you how to start a business. What I'm going to help you do is figure out, is it better to start it, by buying a business or doing it from scratch? And, it's, how to buy a business. That's another one of those discussions that we can have at another time because there's just too much involved with that. I'm not going to suggest that you quit your day job and become an entrepreneur. That's a personal decision, and I just want to help you get confident and, give you all the information that you need to make the best decision. That's it. So that's pretty much all we're going to do today. And may create more questions than answers, but that's okay. I have a solution for that as well. So let's go on. Let's move on here. So, in my day job working as a small business advisor for an SBA lender, I've been seeing an uptick in small business merger and acquisition activity. And it's being referred to as the silver tsunami. Maybe you've heard this term used before. What does it mean? The baby boomers who own small businesses are getting to the age where they're looking to retire. And the youngest of the baby boomers are turning 62 this year. That's the youngest of the baby boomers, okay? So in many cases, there is a lack of legacy ownership interest. Kids don't want the business for whatever reason. They want to do their own thing. Employees, don't always want to take on the ownership responsibility. This isn't always the case, mind you. There are some that do. And competitors, if a competitor comes in, they're looking for fire sale prices typically. And as a result, there's a lot of businesses that have been hitting the market, both publicly and privately. What I mean by that is some of them you'll find listed on websites, and we'll cover some of those in a little bit. But others are just like, you might be talking to friends and say, hey, if you know of anybody who's interested in buying my business, let me know. Those are like the private listings. So the supply-demand imbalance that exists right now has created more opportunities to buy than there are people who are willing to buy. And when you have lower demand and higher supply, that creates pricing pressure. And in other words, if it's a buyer's market, and in many cases right now, you can get a pretty good deal. And so let's see what else we have here. If a business doesn't sell, there's a reason, and it's usually because the price is too high. That's generally the reason why a business won't sell. And some businesses that don't sell, they just eventually just close down and they fire sale the assets and they just call it a day. So here's a tip. Even if you're thinking about building a business from scratch, you can pick up some assets for a cheap price, by going on the secondary market and looking for these types of things. I know a lot of people who do that, particularly like in the restaurant business. You should not have to buy anything new. I mean, you can. It does make sense to buy some things new, but there's just about anything imaginable that you can get on the secondhand market. However, I'll say this: there are a lot of businesses that are struggling financially right now. And this is why the owner wants out. So buyer beware. You have to really, know what you're looking at, know what you're buying. And, we'll touch on a little bit of that today, but that's probably a good topic for round two of this series. Okay, let's move on. Buying a business, building a business, neither one of them is easy. They're both difficult to do. Okay, there's a lot involved with both processes, a lot of decisions to make that you have to make, and a lot, can and probably will end up going wrong, right? But look, here's the thing: the biggest thing about this whole question of buy versus build. When you buy an existing business, the biggest benefit is, don't miss this. Okay, this is very important. All or most of the mistakes have already been experienced, and more importantly, they've been paid for with somebody else's money. Okay, that's a huge benefit in favor of buying an existing business. And if you've ever been through the process of building your own business, you'll appreciate that statement. It's very, very true, very valuable situation. Okay, does it cost less to build a business from scratch or buy an existing business? The answer depends on a lot of things. The out-of-pocket costs are one thing, but there's something else called the opportunity cost. And, what is an opportunity cost? The opportunity cost is the cost of not doing something, or it's also the cost of the alternative you didn't choose to do. In the buy versus build equation, you can compare the out-of-pocket cost of the two alternatives, but what about the cost of your time? Or if it's money that you don't have to spend in one case versus the other. Okay. If it takes you a year to get the revenue up to the point where it would have been if you bought a business, the time difference has a value that needs to be added to the cost of building the business from scratch. Opportunity cost is usually the biggest differential in the buy versus build equation. Time is money, and when you buy an existing business, part of what you're buying is time. You're going to be saving time by using the existing infrastructure that already exists. And you're going to be making money sooner than you would be if you had to spend time building everything from scratch. That cost savings has value, and that's essentially what you're paying for when you buy an existing business. So whether you build a business or buy a business, you're racing against the clock. And will you hit break-even point before you run out of money? That's the question on everybody's mind who's been down this road. Every day that passes with you spending money instead of making money quickens your pending demise. Okay. And, business owners refer to this, they talk about it all the time, it's the cash burn rate, which is how long your money will last, how long until you run out of money. And by the way, running out of money is the second most common reason why new businesses fail. You want to know the first one? The number one reason why new businesses fail is because the market for the product or service is too small or too difficult to reach. Now, buying an existing business, assuming it has good sales and profitability, which is ideally what you want to look for, eliminates both of these risks. Okay, is this starting to make sense? Why we're having this discussion? Okay. What else do I have on here? This is what I already told you. Your time is the most valuable thing you have because of the almost unlimited uses that you have for it. And whatever you choose to do at your time, you want to derive the most value from it, however you choose to define value, whatever that is for you. Your work time can be spent working a paying job or on, maybe a different business or something like that, right? And so these are the things that are need to be taken into consideration. By far, without a question, the biggest challenge associated with building a business from scratch is what is called the proof of concept test. And what that means is how long will it take for the business to be able to support itself? In other words, revenue is at least equal to, but hopefully greater than your expenses. So for some businesses, this could take years. And I've seen it happen. And some business, it could take, maybe 3 to 6 months, but a year is not uncommon when it comes to ramping up a business. So anyway, how long will it take is really the question. And so what I tell people is you look at this in the sense of, is the business viable? In other words, capable of supporting itself? In most cases, the answer to this is yes, unless you're building some kind of business that's never been built before. If you're starting up a coffee shop, well, yeah, a coffee shop is viable. If it's, people run them all the time. Is it feasible? That's really more the question. And feasibility comes down to how good you are at running the business. Did you pick the right location? Did you price it right? Are you nice to customers? All these other factors that determine the success of the business is a big part of that equation. So the argument for buying an existing business is much more compelling if viability and feasibility have already been proven. And this is the entire basis, by the way, of business value. The business is worth a multiple of its profit. Without profitability, you're merely buying assets, and they could be tangible or intangible, and they're usually at fire sale prices. So it's because of the profitability that it gives that's really where the value of the business is. A lot of businesses, they fail because they can't prove viability and maintain it, viability and feasibility. And move on to the next slide here. The risk of entrepreneurism increases exponentially if building the business, if you're building a business from the ground up, and that's because you have to prove viability and feasibility. And again, I can't not emphasize the importance of this enough. This is the primary reason in favor of buying an existing business. 90% of new startups ending up failing because they can't prove viability and feasibility. And your odds of success are greatly improved if you buy a business that has already been proven to be viable and feasible. So, you might be thinking at this point, okay, I'm interested, how do I know how much a business is worth? And again, we could do a deep dive on this. I'm going to touch on this very lightly because we could spend all day on it. But there's a number of different valuation methods, and the primary one, as I said, is income. Your business is worth a function of its profitability. So in the income approach to value, they look at the historical financial performance of the business. This means we're looking back at, say, the last 2-3 years, and they're looking at something called STE, seller's discretionary earning. That's the number that everybody's shooting for. And that is the amount of cash the owner can expect to receive from the business. That's like what you're going to earn as the owner. And listen, I should note this because I see this in a lot of cases where this kind of gets lost in the weeds, but there are expectations that you should have as an entrepreneur in terms of money that you're going to receive from your business. The first is you should expect to receive a salary for working at the business. That's for putting your time in at the business, right? The other is that you should expect an annual return on your investment. Think of it as like a dividend. If you bought a stock or something like that, you put your money in that instead of your business, that you would receive that. So you should expect the same from your business. And eventually you're going to expect a return of your investment, whatever it is that what your net investment is at that time, because maybe you've already taken some money out. But at some point you should get all three of those. You should receive all three of those things. I find a lot of people, particularly those people who start a business from scratch, they are working for free for a long time. And I mean, not like, just a few months. In some cases, it could be a couple of years before they're earning enough to make a salary. So when you buy an existing business, this is kind of addressed right at the upfront. How much am I going to make by working at this business? So again, that's another good reason for why you want to, explore this at the very least. So the way that it works is they use multiples, and there may be like a multiple of sales. The business is worth 2 times sales, or it's worth 3 times STE, or 2.5 times EBITDA. There's all these different multiples that they use, and there's a number of different businesses that valuation companies, and they have all these industry average multiples and stuff like that. One of them is called Reliant Business Valuation. And I just got an email from those guys this morning, as a matter of fact. They have really good stuff. I've never worked with them before, but I get their emails. And I'm sure there's others. You can just do an AI search and find information. But I find Reliant stuff to be really good. I'm supposed to give you 3 options, but I only know of that one. So I can't give you any others. But like I said, you can go research it, or look at AI could probably give you some good ballpark. It's different for every business, different for every industry. So it's not like I gave you some broad numbers there, but it may or may not be applicable for the type of business that you're looking at. So there's also the book value of the business, and the book value of the business is on the balance sheet, the financial statements. It's on the balance sheet, and it's basically the cost of whatever the business bought less the accumulated depreciation. These are all the assets, okay, that they bought, and they've depreciated them over time, and this is what the remaining book value is. Now, oftentimes that number is way below what the market value of a business is. And so there's going to be a price premium there. How much is that price premium, and is it worth it? I've had situations where working with clients, where they're looking at the business and not necessarily interested so much in the earnings of the current earnings of the business. They're interested in just the assets. And so, that's really how they're looking at it from their standpoint in terms of what they feel the value is, what they're willing to pay for it. So this is what how people look at these things. The difference between the value that the buyer and seller agree on and the book value is this thing called goodwill. Okay, and it's basically intangible value. So let's say, for instance, let's say you're buying a business for $1 million, and it has $750,000 of assets, of book value assets. So there's $250,000 of what's called goodwill. That's not a lot in many cases. I've seen deals where it's like almost all goodwill. And but understand, goodwill means that there's no collateral for the lender and even for you. I mean, you're basically buying something that is not as secure because there's no assets backing it up other than the continuation of the the money machine, if you will, the revenue from the business. So just keep in mind, I mean, it's ideally you should try to buy a cash rich business or an asset rich business. And because again, it's going to minimize the risk. The less goodwill there is, the less risk there is for you for buying the business. And also, I can tell you, if you're looking to finance a business, we'll get into that in a little bit, but you need to get an appraisal. And appraisals, when they look at goodwill, they'll allow some goodwill, but if the business is like 90% goodwill, they're gonna look at that very negatively. So, just be aware of that as well. Okay, let's see what else we have here. There's how else can you find out what your business is potentially worth? Well, you can get a broker's opinion of value, which is usually free. You can go to a broker and say, hey, what do you think this business is worth? And if there's a listing broker on the sale of the business, you could add, that's another way of getting a good sense of value. You can also do an appraisal. And again, if you get an SBA loan or any kind of bank loan, they're probably going to want an appraisal anyway. And that's a little bit more involved. There's a big report associated with that. Costs anywhere from a couple thousand, $2,000 to $5,000, $2,500, something like that. It's a little bit more money. And but look, at the end of the day, all this is really like it's somewhat nonsensical because the valuation methodologies, they just offer guidelines. This is what it's all about, folks. At the end of the day, the business is worth whatever a buyer is willing to pay and whatever the seller is willing to accept. Now, under normal circumstances, this should sync with the multiples. Everything should be around the same number, right? But it doesn't always work out that way, where it's like, okay, this is what the multiple says. This is how much we should pay. Everything is negotiable, and value is adjusted for the perceived risk, which varies by the individual. So I'll tell you a quick story. So I'm working with a regular client of mine, and she's looking to buy a similar business to what she has right now. She found one, and the price was around $4.5 million, and which is a big number, but it included the business and it included the real estate. It had a pretty big building, like a 20,000 square foot building, which is pretty big. And so, she's looking at it, she's like, it's $4.5 million. I think it was $1.5 million for the business and $3 million for the building. And she was like, the business does not have any value to me. She goes, I don't want the business. And I said, okay. She goes, but and even the building, she says, the building's like half empty. And I'm not going to use the whole thing. So, she's like, it's not worth, that much to me either. I said, okay, what do you think it's worth? $2.5 million. I said, all right, great. They can offer $2.5 million. They're not going to accept it, but if that's what the value is to you, then that's what you offer, because what they say the value is maybe not the way that you're looking at it. So it doesn't really matter what they think or it's really all about what it is that you want to pay for it. So, okay. What else do I have for you here? In this case, the seller their expectation of value, the $4.5 million, I think was unreasonable. I think the deal was priced for perfection. It assumed that, somebody was going to come in and continue to run this business. Come to find out, this business didn't really have a great reputation, culture. There was some employee issues and things of that nature. So, again, it was priced for perfection. And, the issue is that it probably, if you bought the building, you probably would not ever realize the value that you were going to be paying for it. And what I say is time usually cures these problems. And in the case of my client, I said, look, I said, wait a year, maybe wait 2 years. I said, your $2 million offer that they won't take right now may become a great offer in a year or two when they can't find anybody else to buy it. And so, part of the time you've got to be patient. And the reason why is there's not a lot of liquidity in the small business M&A market. There aren't people lining up to buy businesses in many cases, unless it's a good one. There are some cases like that, but for the most part, it's not the case. It's not like the housing market. You hear the housing market right now, people are paying more than asking for homes in New England and particularly in Connecticut. Yeah, that's true. They are, but it's because there's a supply and demand imbalance, and there's very little liquidity in the market right now. Okay, so again, be patient. I've had situations, another client where we offered to buy it was a similar sort of thing. They just wanted to buy the building, and this was like a couple of years ago. And I checked the other day, the building is still there. The business is still there. They're still trying to sell it. They still haven't sold it. It's still there. So part of what it is that you're doing here, this is all about deal making, right? And deal making is about understanding your degree of negotiation leverage, being disciplined, and being patient. I'm not guaranteeing that they're going to come back and accept the $2.5 million offer in a year or two, but they might. I mean, sometimes they have to be educated about the true market and what it is that people are willing to pay for the building and the business. So we'll see. To be continued on that one. Okay, so what's the process? How do you go about buying a business, right? I think the first thing that you have to do is define exactly what you're looking for, and that would be the type of building, the area that you're looking in, the size, and all those kinds of criteria, right? Chances are you're not going to find an exact match. It's just not likely because again, there's not going to be a ton of businesses that are available that are going to fit whatever it is that you're looking for. So what I tell people is, look beyond what's there right now and consider whatever is the infrastructure that you need. And that includes assets, people, and processes. That's really what you're buying and what you're looking at. So, it might be a business in a completely different industry, but they have the same type of employees, they have the same type of assets and et cetera, that you might be able to use for your business. It's not an exact fit. It's going to have to be modified, nipped and tucked here or there a little bit, right? But you might be able to make it work. And then, start looking. Get out there, and a lot of this you can do online. That's the next slide. I'll show you some of the sites you can look at. Try to find also a business with unrealized upside potential where you can add some post-closing value. I have a guy who I work with who buys liquor stores, and he loves to buy liquor stores from like 75, 80-year-old people who've like had it in the family. It's been a family business forever. And the reason he likes to buy those is because they have no technology. They have no, social media presence. They have no website, or they do if they do, it's minimal. And so what he does is he comes in, he has all the infrastructure that you can buy the liquor online, home delivery, all this kind of stuff. And for not a whole lot of effort, he can add a whole lot of value and make the business a lot more profitable than it was previously. So that's upside potential. So, if you can find something like that, if you don't mind doing the work, in this case, he doesn't, it's not really too much work from his standpoint. And like I said, you can really juice your returns in terms of doing that. So if you are interested in a business, what I would say is, go check it out. See what it looks like. And if you want, you can pose as a secret shopper. Go in there and just make believe you're a customer. If you want to be anonymous for the time being, I know a lot of people do that to start. And you take a look at it and see what it's all about. Okay, so here's where you can find businesses. I've got 5 of each type here. So these are online marketplaces. Biz Buy Sell is by far the most popular. That's where you'll find a lot of places. Business for Sale. LoopNet's another big one. LoopNet is real estate, but you can find businesses on there as well. And then here's a whole bunch of ones for franchises as well, if you're interested in looking at franchises. There's also, just like there's real estate brokers, there's business brokers, people who their job is, helping others buy and sell businesses. That's what they do. Not, real estate agents help you buy and sell a house. They help you buy and sell a business. And some real estate brokers dabble in this space as well because it's kind of similar to what they do anyway. So they can be very valuable. They know the market. A lot of businesses that are for sale, they may be under not presently publicly known under the right circumstances, though. They might, yeah, I know a guy who might consider selling. His business is officially for sale right now, but it's a quiet listing, if you will, right? So there are those kinds of situations, and they're the ones who know where all those are, So not all of them. So you may have to do some canvassing and cold calling yourself, right? And you might have to get out there if you see a business and you're like, oh man, I'd love to buy that business. It's perfect for what I need. Go talk to the manager, the owner. Hopefully it's the same person, and see what happens. Clients tell me this story a lot. People come into their store and they're like, hey, if you're ever interested in selling your business, let me know. I'd be interested in buying your business. It's like, okay, that's good information to keep in the back of your mind. It may come back around again. Asking is free, doesn't cost you anything, right? Just say, hey, I'm interested. Here's my contact information. Call me if if you're interested. And I'll tell you what, every business is for sale at the right price. So whatever that right price is, I don't know. It's, again, price is determined by buyer and seller. It's whatever they both negotiate. But you'd be surprised that there may be some some opportunities that you're able to scratch up by just having some conversations with people. So let's talk about the process. I'm going to lightly touch on this again because there is a lot involved in the process of buying a business. But the first is it's always going to start off with a non-disclosure agreement, which is the agreement between the potential buyer and the seller saying that you're not going to share any of the trade secret information, financials, anything that they may share with you. You're bound by confidentiality. You're not going to be able to share it with anybody. And so very common that you'll be asked to sign that. However, get an attorney to look at it before you sign it. It's one of those things that this is not a do-it-yourself function. You're going to need people to help you, and a good attorney is very valuable in these kinds of situations. They can save you a lot of money and keep your butt out of trouble down the road. Okay. Ask a lot of questions. That's really what due diligence is all about. And you should demand satisfactory answers. This is a big financial move for you. So you want to make sure you do your homework. Ask the question, why is the seller selling? Why are they really selling? What's their motivation? And I would say, trust what they tell you, but also you want to verify it. If something seems illogical, like they give you an answer, it's like, I don't know, that doesn't seem right. The reason it doesn't seem right is because there's missing information that you don't yet know. Okay, so consider that. So it's like, all right, what else do I have to keep digging at here to find the answer that I'm looking for? Because at the end of the day, it should make sense. Everything you're being told should add up in your own mind, and you should feel comfortable about it. In a lot of cases, particularly if you're in the sub $1 million market, which I think in many cases, that's probably where we're looking at playing right here. You're buying someone else's problems, okay? And that's just the reality. So you want to make sure you understand what they are, particularly legacy liabilities and outstanding liens. This one's a big one. So let's say, for instance, you buy a business and then you realize that, oh, hey, this business had a loan to somebody or, with somebody, and I didn't know about it. Or there was liens on the assets that the lenders placed on the furniture or the equipment or even the inventory or something like that, right? These things come up all the time. So to get around this, typically what a lawyer will do is we'll close down the old entity when you really just you're just transferring the assets. You just buy the assets. So there's no legacy liabilities. The liens, however, survive. I mean, they're filed with the state, so you can find them. It's there, but unfortunately, a lot of lawyers miss this part. They don't do a lien search. So you want to make sure you work with a lawyer who knows what they're doing, who understands the business of buying an existing business, because you want to make sure that you don't have any of these things. By the way, the reason I'm telling you this, we see this all the time in the lending business. This happens all the time. So somebody will sell a business and they don't tell the buyer that they had a loan and that there's liens on it, and they don't tell us they sold the business. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff goes on. So I'm speaking from experience here. So when you're doing your due diligence, look for red flags: sloppiness, disorganization, a poor culture. You can't assess a lot of these things until you actually get in there, roll up your sleeves. Regulatory non-compliance and fraud. So I'd say to people, if there's undeclared cash income in the business, that's the same as no income as far as the financing is concerned in the SBA world. If you're looking for SBA financing. So again, and there's also a trust issue. Think about it this way: if somebody is defrauding the government, you think they'd think twice about defrauding you. So you really want to give consideration to that. It's like, maybe this isn't the right business for me to buy. Okay, so just things to think about. Okay, what else do we have here? Oh yeah, I mean, as part of the due diligence, I would also do a business case analysis. If you go on the Western Connecticut website, I created a template. And I do classes on this as well. It's called a business case. It's a way to basically test on paper the viability and feasibility of the business before you go ahead and commit time and money to it. Really good exercise. It's a Q&A document to kind of help you assess how what the prospects are for the business. I like putting that information. I take the template, I anonymize it, and I put it into AI and ask it to analyze it for me. It does a really great job of telling me, what the prospects are for the business. I would also do a financial projection. Now, I told you before, the business valuation is going to be based on the historical numbers for the business, but on a going forward basis, things are going to change. You're going to change things with the business, right? You might not keep all the customers, whatever. You're hoping to get new customers. Well, do a financial projection of what you think, the future might look like, and test the sensitivity of those assumptions. If sales grow by 1% versus another, or if the expenses are different or whatever, just play around with it and see, does it still pencil out? Does it still look good on paper for you? Another thing I like to do is a stakeholder analysis, which is all the people who are involved in the business. I'm not just talking about the employees, like who do they buy from, who are their regulators. It's the entire universe of people that either are affected by this business or that the business directly engages with. So very important to do that, mostly because whatever relationships that exist, you want to make sure they continue. And so the whole purpose is really to affect relationship continuity. This next one is the business owner proof. I just wrote a blog post about this not too long ago. I think it was put out on SCORE's social media, and it's also on my company's website. But what that basically means is, a business is owner proof when the business can survive and even, do well without the current owner. You'd be surprised how many businesses that they're so dependent on the owner, that if you took the owner out of the equation for whatever reason, the business would pretty much just crater. And I've had that conversation with people that come to me and say, well, what do you think my business is worth? And I tell them, business isn't worth anything. And like, what are you talking about? I said, yeah, because you're the business. You go away, what's there left? There's nothing left. So you want to make sure that you can step into the owner's shoes and be just as successful, if not, even more successful. Again, is there unrealized upside potential? We talked about that a few minutes ago. You want to make sure that that it's there. If there is, it's something that you can achieve, right? You see something that there's an opportunity there, you want to be able to to achieve it. Now, I'll tell you this: changing an existing business can be more difficult than creating a new one. Depends on how much change that you want to make. If you want to do a little change here and there, but I've had situations with people where they want to go in and they want to make like wholesale changes to the business and changing the culture of the organization and all this other kind of stuff. And it's like, in that case, why don't you just start a new business? Because the business you're buying isn't going to be anything like the one that you're going to create. So, it can be very, very difficult to change an existing business. And people are your greatest assets. There's you gotta respect the human element, and that is, most people don't like change, right? And so people being what they are, you want to make the place fun to work there. That's the culture that you want to create, and you have to get the right people, processes, and the potential to make that happen. So again, the more change that you're looking to make, the more difficult and the riskier it will be. So you need to have what I call a strategic change management plan. Think of it as like a business plan or a marketing strategy. It's like you need to create a plan for how we're going to achieve and implement change. And that may sound like silly or or not necessary, but believe me, it is, particularly if you're looking to make a lot of change. So I'm actually working on an organizational change management webinar, and I'm hoping to roll it out in the spring. So look for that. It'll probably be coming out then. Okay, let's move on to to the funding piece here. Okay. A lot of people never consider buying a business because of the upfront cost. It may cost as much or even more to build a business than it is to buy an existing one. So, and again, a lot of it just depends on how long will it take for you to reach break even. Time is money, right? And the financial projection, by the way, will show you the cumulative negative cash flow that you're going to realize. Let's say it takes you 10 months before you get your revenues above your expenses. Well, how are you going to cover that shortfall for 10 months? And what does that add up to? Oh, that's $100,000. Oh, wow. Okay. So if I could buy a business for $100,000, then maybe I should do that. These are the kinds of questions that you're going to anticipate and address when you go through this, when you go through this process. Everything always takes longer and costs more than you anticipated. I'll tell you that. So, you want to make sure that you've got extra cash and reserve borrowing, like a line of credit product. You want to make sure that you don't overpay for the business or any of the assets. You want to make sure you keep your overhead costs low. I could tell you many stories about clients who got into bad situations where they just spent too much money building the business in many cases, and they were never able to charge enough money to make their business work, and many of them end up closing down. So again, be disciplined. Really don't let your heart. It's really easy to get carried away with this and just start doing crazy things like, oh well, we need this, and we'll make it up later. Well, you might not. So where do you find money? This here, by the way, I do a 3-hour, 2.5-hour workshop on this topic. You're getting one slide. You're getting it in like 2 minutes. There's a lot to talk about here, but I'm just going to give you the high points. Okay. Where can you find money? First place is your money. Your money is always going in first. Nobody's going to give you their money until you put your money in. So you've got to have some money to, there's no such thing as starting a business or buying a business with no money down. You're going to need money, right? The other one is other people's money. And there's a number of sources that we can look at here. One is a lender. You can go to a bank. Whoever the business banks with presently is probably the best place to go if you're looking for capital from a bank, because they know the business. If they, for whatever reason, they like the deal, but maybe they're a little reticent about funding it, they might do an SBA loan, which the SBA doesn't make the loan. The SBA guarantees the loan. So they might get a 75% guarantee on the loan, which makes them a little bit more comfortable doing the deal. If they, for whatever reason, don't want to do a loan with you, then there's this type of lender called a community lender. And that's, by the way, a company like that I work for, Community Investment Corporation. We are a community lender. We give loans to people who can't get bank loans. That's why we exist. And then the last option, which is one that oftentimes comes into play, is seller financing. So this is, where if the business is not liquid, if it's having a tough time selling, and the seller says, okay, well, look, I'll carry 25% of the price as a loan. Okay, well, that all of a sudden greases the skids and makes the deal a lot quicker, a lot easier to get done. So keep in mind that, even though they might not be offering financing, everything's negotiable, as I said earlier, and you might be able to work that into the deal and make the financials work. Or the last option is, you could bring in an equity partner, and that also could include the seller. Maybe the seller stays on for a 25% interest in the business, and they're there to help you not only with the relationship transitioning and understanding how to run the business, but they're not completely 100% out of the equation, and they can still be a resource for you. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. All right, we're down to the positives and negatives. So, the positive of building a business from scratch is that you have full control. You can make whatever you want. It's like a build-to-suit situation, right? The culture that you want, you can create all of that. None of that is going to exist, right? And the lower purchase costs up front. Maybe if you buy used assets, you could probably get in for less than it would cost to buy a business. But again, remember the opportunity cost of your time. There's flexibility in operations. You get to make all the rules. There's also personal fulfillment. There's a pride factor. I get that. And but and there's a lot more potential for innovation. There's nothing really to change at this point. There's no sacred cows because you're pretty much putting everything in place. The negatives, of course, is that the slower ramp up. It could take you years to replicate what you'd have if you bought a business out of the gate. And I'm not kidding. It can take years. It really can, depending upon the situation. So there's a much higher risk of failure because the viability and feasibility haven't been proven. It's maybe a little bit more difficult to find financing in some cases because the story's not that good. There's a lower confidence because of that viability feasibility issue that I just mentioned, right? And it can be a steep learning curve. You have a lot to learn in a short period of time. It can be done. It is done, but it's the reality of that situation. And the biggest one is you don't have any established revenue, and sales is so important. When you're prioritizing your daily to-do list, if you're building a business from scratch, there's nothing more important than selling. That has to be your number one priority. You need to get money coming in the door as quickly as possible. Now, what are the positives of building? I can't see it on my screen because I got some things here blocking it. But immediate cash flow. If you buy an existing business, you got money coming in on day one. All right. It's easier to get financing because the business has a known track record. You've got an established brand and reputations, relationships that are already in place. You've got existing staff and systems. All the infrastructure is there. You don't have to spend the time doing that. And the startup risk is reduced because there's less uncertainty. Mistakes, like I said, have already been paid for. And here's another one. Even if you're looking to build a business, I'm finding this to be the case in a lot of situations where people can't find commercial space for their business. I mean, that's how it is here in New England. It's become very difficult to find space. And if you can't find suitable location to start a business, buying an existing business is a way to establish a presence in a market, particularly if the market's in short supply of space, which again, we're seeing more and more here. So throw that out as a potential idea for people. What are the negatives? Well, you might have to pay more. I'm not blind to that fact, but question is it worth it? It might be. Hidden problems. The due diligence might not find everything. There might be things that you later discover after the money's changed hands and everything. People again are resistant to change, so that's a challenge in many cases. And you're going to have limited creativity at least initially. So you want to make changes gradually over time, and then integration challenges. The complexity of running the business will extend the amount of time it takes you to master it and do it well. So, like I said, if you buy the business, you want to be able to replicate the success that the owner had, and even hopefully do better than that in not a lot of time. Okay, so just to wrap up here, regardless of whether you choose to buy or build a business from scratch, it's going to be a lot of time, money, and effort. I think we know that. Building and running a business, they're very different functions. And buying an existing business can increase your odds of avoiding failure so you can focus more on being successful. That's really what this is all about. I wrote that business case template that I spoke about previously because when I realized the fail rate of startup entrepreneurs, I was like, wow, that's really startling. And what can we do to get that number down? Well, we can do a better job on the upfront of analyzing these opportunities and seeing if they're worth pursuing, and if they're not, then we cut our losses and move on. Some businesses are difficult to create, so buying an existing one may make more sense. And flip side as well. I mean, if you can't find one, then maybe you don't have any choice but to build it. So every situation is going to be different. And but like I said, you may be able to buy an existing business at a very favorable price. Hopefully that's the case. If you need help, okay, there's a couple of things here. I do a podcast. It's called Small Business Intelligence, and we talk about things like this, like building, versus buying businesses. And so, if you want to tune into that, I'll have the information on the last slide. As I mentioned, I also do blog posts. They get put out by SCORE as well, and on some topics such as these. But as far as training is concerned, like I said, if you buy a franchise, you're going to get training from the franchisor. If you buy an existing business, you're going to get training from the business owner. But there's also, a SCORE mentor. If you're not already a SCORE client, you can get a free business mentor to help you. SCORE's library of all the webinars and everything that we've done is extensive. as Budley mentioned earlier, we do about 100 of these a year. And so there's a tremendous amount of information. There's like no topic that we don't think we haven't covered that's in that library. So be sure to take advantage of that. As I mentioned earlier, this is not a do-it-yourself function. So, get help, including, I cannot emphasize the importance of this enough. Get a good lawyer who understands these types of deals, not the guy who helped you buy your house. Okay. Get somebody who understands how to buy a business. It's a different animal. Okay. So you want to make sure you get somebody good. Now let's talk about AI. We can't end the discussion without talking about AI, in my opinion. It's there's a lot that that we can talk about here. So these are ways that artificial intelligence can help you in this process. AI is great for answering questions. You can voice any concerns, give you any advice. It can tell you what its concerns are, that kind of thing, right? So how can you use AI to help you make this decision? The process is a lot of research and analysis, and those are the sort of things that AI is great at. So all the things that we've been talking about are kind of right here. This is on this list. Even if you have any other questions, right? You can call me. I'm happy to talk with you. But you go into an AI agent and say, "Hey, I've got a question. Here's tell me what you know about this." You'll just be amazed at what it gives you back. Okay, there's just it's a really great tool, and I think we're still finding new ways to use it. So here's my contact information. I'm going to leave you with a quick story. Have you ever heard of a company called Berkshire Hathaway? I imagine most people have. Its roots date back to 1839. It started out as a textile company in New England until a guy by the name of Warren Buffett. Have you ever heard of him? Warren Buffett bought the company in 1965 for the equivalent of about $88 billion in 2026 dollars, which is a lot. But he turned it into a $1 trillion mega conglomerate investment holding company whose mission has always been the same, which is to buy and hold undervalued companies. And Berkshire Hathaway right now ranks among the top 15 most valuable companies in the world. And again, Buffett, he's strictly a financial investor. He doesn't run any of the business he buys. He buys multi-billion-dollar businesses in whole or in part, and he lets the management team that's in place run them. And he just basically takes all the profits from it. Private equity firms, venture capitalists, they exist for the same purpose, but they're more of a strategic investor that gets in the trenches with their investment subjects, looking to help them achieve unrealized upside potential. Chances are you're probably going to be playing in the sub $1 million market where there isn't nearly as much competition as where the big guys play, but it doesn't matter. Okay, the point of this is you can apply the same winning principles as what the most sophisticated and most wealthy financial managers on the planet employ to make money. Thank you for your time and attention.
Well, Joe, as usual, that was terrific. Why don't you put your information up while we go through the Q&A? And
This
first one
information?
is just a refresh. Do you have any tools, platforms, bulletins, or places where we can start looking for businesses to buy? I know you mentioned that. You may want to just run a short list again.
Yeah. Again, you're going to get the copies of these slides, and I had 5 or 6 of them in that one slide, including biz buy sell. That's the most common one. That's the one that they're kind of like the multiple listing equivalent of buying a business. So I would start there. That would be the best place to go. But that's another good AI question. Hey, do you know of any businesses? Because it'll scour the internet for all kinds of different different resources, and it'll maybe come up with some other things. It's not, you
And
don't
you
just go to
can
one place. You're going to look at multiple sources.
Absolutely. And with the AI, just to add on to that, you can say, I'm looking for a particular type of business. Where can I look?
Yeah.
Next question. I've read that private equity is taking advantage of the silver tsunami and buying up small businesses. Do you have any insight into how this impacts entrepreneurs looking to buy small businesses and which sectors are most impacted? How is
Yeah.
this impacting price for buyers?
Yeah, that's very true. Okay. And why is private equity poking around there? The reason is very simple, because there's money to be made. They're going after the money. Now, again, I'll go back to what I just said a moment ago. They play at a little higher level. So their chances are they're not gonna get too interested. I mean, I shouldn't say that, because they're now buying plumbers, electricians, they're buying smaller businesses because they're cash cows. So yes, it does create a situation where there's more competition. And in that case, the prices are going to be reflected accordingly. But a lot of businesses are not on private equity's radar. And the ones that are, yes, there's going to be competition. Private equity's been in a little bit of a tough spot the last number of years. We collect newspaper articles, which is what we talk about on the podcast, by the way. And we see that it's been a little slow in their business. They're now just starting to free up their capital and selling off their businesses and stuff like that. So it's they're it's not like they have unlimited funds. They have a lot of money, but they've got their own challenges that they're dealing with right now. But chances are, like you said, you're not going to probably come into contact with any private equity firms in what it is that we're talking about here today.
Here's one for you. How can we make sure that there are no lawsuits or penalties from the government or taxes that are in place for a business you might be wanting to purchase?
Well, like I said, the typical way that we handle these deals is the attorney will close down the existing entity when it gets sold, and you'll transfer the assets to the new business entity. So the old legacy entity disappears. So any of the liabilities that were associated with it, that it dies with it. So they won't get transferred.
So it would be homework by an attorney that you
Yes,
would
that's
want.
why I said get a good attorney, somebody who knows what they're doing, and that may or may not be your attorney that helped you buy your house or that got you off the speeding ticket or whatever. I mean, they all have specialties, and we have some people in our Cliff Enico is one. I mean, Cliff knows how to do this. We're supposed to recommend others, and I'm sure we have others, but Cliff's a guy who I send people to a lot, and I've worked with him as well. He's very good. He knows what he's doing. So very important that you work with somebody who knows what they're doing.
Well, with that, do you have any experience with buying dump truck businesses, car washes, or ambulance companies?
Yes, I have a client who had a excavation business. I have a client right now who has a business that rents dumpsters, car washes. I don't know if I've ever worked with a car wash before. Car washes are very specialized facilities. They're a little bit more tricky to get financing for. What was the last one?
Ambulance companies.
Um, yeah, I haven't worked anybody directly with that, but they're out there. You could maybe find businesses like that, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Next one, again, kind of specific. I own a golf travel agency I may sell. I have thousands of customers. Should I ask them if they would be interested in buying?
Yeah, I mean, I what I oftentimes tell people is that you don't have to go very far when it comes to looking for people to buy your business. It's usually only like 1 or 2 degrees of separation. It's somebody who either knows you or knows somebody who knows you, right? It's they know your business. You don't have to, usually you don't have to go very far. And that's been the case of the deals that I've been involved in. I've had situations where one client of mine will buy another client of mine's business. So it's kind of how that's kind of how it works. It's kind of a small world, and it doesn't really you don't have to go that far.
Last question before we do our wrap up. And it's a refresher, how do I find a business broker?
There is, if you go online, there's national associations. I forget the name off the top of my head right now, but there are organizations of business brokers. There's one in particular, and so you can go on there and find people. There's a number of them in Connecticut. I know we've got people far and wide on the program today, but there's groups out there that they industry associations, and I would start there. A lot of them have certifications programs and stuff. In certain states like Rhode Island, you have to be licensed as a business broker in Rhode Island. Other states don't require licensing. So it's a little bit different in each state, but there's definitely those groups that you can tap into and check out.
Well, thank you, Joe. We have sort of run out of time here. Quick
Good.
wrap up is, as a reminder, a recording of this webinar and any materials will be available within a couple of days on the westernconnecticut.score.org website. Please check our website, as I just listed, for information on upcoming webinars. And again, SCORE offers free individual counseling, so please use the link that we've got on screen and request a mentor, and we do sessions in any which way possible. Also, please fill out your evaluations that will be sent at the end of the webinar. On behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank you for attending today's SCORE live webinar. And in closing, a big thank you to Joe for presenting. Have a nice day, everyone, and thank you for being here.